let's start with our insight for this week. This is held by Mr. Eskola from Be Healthy and focuses on the topic lessons from Northern Europe, what works and what doesn't in interoperability and telematic infrastructure. Mr. Eskola, you can gladly share your screen and start.
All right, very good. Thanks a lot, Jennifer, and thanks for having me. Maybe a little bit on my background. I've been working with healthcare topics for the past maybe 13 years. I started on the investment side of things. I was working for a private equity company that was investing in healthcare, and we had invested in a Finnish healthcare business called Mehiläinen, which ended up being a very, very fun project for myself, getting to know the business so much so that I then actually ended up joining Mehiläinen when it was sold to the next private equity fund. And at Mehiläinen, I ran the dental business. I ran international expansion. So I've actually set up the operations for Mehiläinen in Sweden and Germany. And in Germany, it's operating under the brand Meliva. Still fairly small in Germany, but growing quickly. And then we got this idea to actually start up a separate business called Be Healthy, which I'll quickly tell you a little bit more about, so you have some of the context. But that's shortly my background. I'll just share the screen here. All right, can you just confirm that you're seeing the right thing?
Everything looks good.
Very good. So I mean, just for your context on what I've been working with for the past 5 years, Be Healthy. It's a software business, a digital front door or patient platform for healthcare providers. It also works in other care provision models. So we also have social care customers, veterinary care customers. So we have unemployment services customer, but the majority of our customers are healthcare companies that then basically get their patient portal from us, so that the patient gets applications both on web and mobile, and the professionals get their interface. It's white label. So you won't find a Be Healthy application. You'll find it under our customers' names and brands. But providing things like online booking, remote consultations, access to healthcare data, digital care plans. And during the past 5 years, we've grown geographically quite quickly. So we have customers across Europe, and then the Arab Emirates. We have 2 customers in South Africa, and within healthcare, our customers really cover the whole spectrum. So we have pure primary care providers like Intercare in South Africa or Gesond in the Netherlands. We have kind of integrated healthcare providers with everything from primary care to specialist care and hospitals, their own diagnostics like Mediclinic in the Middle East. We also have some hospital chains such as HSG in Greece and Hirslanden in Switzerland. But from this experience, of course, I've had the pleasure of seeing different countries and their kind of infrastructure for telematics or digital healthcare, whatever you want to call it, and challenges in the interoperability that are present everywhere that we've done business. In our home country, so Be Healthy as a business, and me personally, originally we are from Finland, and in Finland we work with the public sector. So the Finnish healthcare market is structured very differently from Germany. So Finland and the Nordic countries in general have a universal public healthcare system, which is funded through taxes, and then you typically have some sort of division of the country into different regions. I think Finland has the most regions per capita out of the Nordic countries, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, the country is divided into 21 regions that are called well-being counties, and those counties are responsible for providing the public health and social care. And many of these regions, they are actually quite developed in terms of digital services for public healthcare, and many of them have tendered for this type of well, they don't call it a patient platform, they call it a kind of a citizen platform. And Be Healthy has won 10 of those regions. So about half of the Finnish population accesses their public health and social care services through the Be Healthy platform, which of course I'm very proud of, and that's a lot of fun working with those regions, driving a lot of digital innovation in the public healthcare side. So just a short intro into what we are working with at Be Healthy. But the topic for today was lessons from Northern Europe, what works and what doesn't in interoperability and telematics infrastructure. And I guess what I often see is that the Nordics are generally thought of being this kind of go-to benchmark when it comes to digital health, to the kind of infrastructure in the healthcare system. I would say that Estonia definitely deserves to be in that bunch as well. And there's often the thinking that these countries are way ahead in digital health. Many of them have these kind of national patient data registries. People might think that there's a kind of unified EMRs with high interoperability. And some of this is definitely true. But I guess when it comes to the details and when we look at how things are actually working, in my opinion, we've definitely not solved everything in any of these countries. But maybe there could be lessons in learning what has worked and then and what hasn't. So I thought I'd share some of those examples, but it's definitely not a holistic presentation of everything when it comes to the rather broad topic. But definitely on many measures, Nordic countries and Estonia are ahead in digital health, even on a global scale. And there are some kind of key ingredients that I think have really helped in that success. Some of them might be hard to copy or change very quickly, but some are. Of course, one thing which I think often differentiates these countries is that there is a very high trust in digital services. I think there's a high trust in kind of public systems in general. There's also a high trust in the cloud services, which I know from all the experience in Germany. This is a topic which is much more complicated. I think in Germany there's generally very low trust in cloud, which I can't say which is right or wrong, but it definitely then it requires a little bit more work when setting up new digital services. From my point of view, if we can trust the cloud, it of course it is a great product. We as Be Healthy, we've been able to scale our product into, I guess, 11 or 12 countries at the moment. We kind of fairly easily by using international cloud providers as the basis for our infrastructure. So this is something that you can see in these countries in general. It's not only in healthcare, it's in banking, it's in kind of governmental services in general. People are used to accessing all the services digitally, and they're used to kind of this self-service digital mentality in many of the services. Then one kind of very key thing, which might sound like a minor detail, but all of these countries, they have a unified and secure way of identifying a person online. Typically, it's through something that's called the bank ID or similar. It comes from the fact that, I guess, in all countries, the financial institutions were the ones that really drove the identification of people online to be able to really enable digital banking services. But these ways of identifying a person online, they become universal on national level. So there's no cross-country method for this, but in Finland there's a way of doing it. In Sweden there's a way of doing it, and it's something that people very generally don't even think about. Everyone uses it, and that in healthcare helps a lot, because healthcare is very personal. It's very, very important to be able to securely identify a person. So this has made then building kind of digital healthcare services so much more easier. Many of these countries were also very early adopters of digital health records, so in practice using electronic medical record systems. This is, of course, something that can be changed fairly quickly as well. But of course, it has made life easier that this is something that in the Nordics, it happened already like 30 years ago. Since it also happened so long ago, on organizational levels, providers typically have unified EMRs. When looking at a healthcare company or organization in Germany, I often see them having still different electronic medical record systems in their different clinics, and that makes a lot of things complicated. It makes the managing of the company complicated, because it's more difficult to actually have up-to-date data all the time on what's going on. but building any type of interoperability or digital services is of course tricky the more systems you're trying to manage. That being said, none of these countries, have any type of unified EMRs on a national level. So still, it is a fragmented space when it comes to different EMRs. But typically, one organization at least tries to have one EMR, and that makes a lot of things easier. E-prescription, I think, in healthcare is a key thing, because a lot of what you want to be able to do within digital healthcare is, if you can't get the prescription through the online services, it kills a lot of the use cases. Then one thing, I don't know if you can kind of categorize reimbursement under telematic infrastructure, but I think it's immensely important for the kind of uptake of remote consultation in healthcare, that they are reimbursed with no artificial restrictions. And best case, they should be text-based, but I'll come to that in a minute. And then there's also the fact that in these countries, you either have kind of large public regions, or especially in Finland, there's a very consolidated private sector. So the organizations that are providing healthcare are quite large. And they're definitely very large and very consolidated if you compare it to countries like Germany and France, where especially the family doctor market is super fragmented. You can have kind of individual doctors running their own clinics. But when you have the larger organizations, it becomes kind of easier to actually set rules and ways of working. So you have more control over how the doctors are actually working. But going into some examples, something that I've had many groups from Germany and the Netherlands, from Belgium, France, Italy come to Finland and for these kind of inspiration trips, and one thing that they always want to hear about is the National Health Information System. So in 2007, the Finnish government, they launched this National Archive of Health Information project. In Finnish, it's called Kanta. Kanta is basically, it could translate to database. And the goal was to create this centralized, standardized electronic health record system for health data across Finland. So basically, all healthcare providers in Finland are required to store the data in Kanta. From every visit, they have to. They still have, a healthcare provider has its EMR, but the EMR has to be linked into Kanta, so that when there's new patient data stored in the EMR, it automatically stores it in Kanta as well. So the idea is that wherever you get your health services from, whether it's a private healthcare business or their competition or a public healthcare region, all of those providers then store the data in Kanta. And it includes electronic prescriptions, patient records, and the kind of storage of personal health data. And absolutely, people who want to hear of it, there's a reason for it. There's a lot of success in it. It has very high adoption rate. All prescriptions are now electronic in Finland. It improves efficiency, reduces paperwork. There's faster access to patient history. There's better patient safety. It prevents maybe a doctor from doing double prescriptions and enables them to better monitor chronic conditions. And patients, have good control over their health data. Then again, the funny thing is that many people don't actually, I mean, from kind of citizens, they don't use the Kanta interface, because typically when, well, in many cases when governments are developing an interface for a system, it doesn't end up being the most user-friendly. It's only online. They are developing a mobile app. There's when you implement this type of regulation, it ends up being tricky for the smaller providers. So in a consolidated market like Finland, this has played in favor of big providers. And then there has been kind of a bit of these silly kind of regulation around how it actually works. So, for example, private healthcare providers are not allowed to read the patient's data from Kanta and show it to patients. So, as an example, when you have private healthcare businesses in Finland, they are a big part of the market because everyone who has a job in Finland, they have occupational healthcare, and they get a lot of their healthcare services from the occupational healthcare services. So, for example, if I use myself as an example, and I'm not a special example in any way, I've always had a job where the company has an occupational healthcare contract with Mehiläinen. So I've ended up mostly using the Mehiläinen application for any healthcare services. But Mehiläinen is not allowed to read from Kanta and show all of my medical data in the Mehiläinen application. They can only show the data that is in their EMR. And I don't think there's any real reason for this. But it's maybe an example of, when if you build something this great on a national level, you should, the kind of from a government perspective, from a national perspective, you should really focus on having the infrastructure for this. I think it makes a lot of sense. But then you should have as open APIs as possible, so that all parties operating in the healthcare system are also allowed to read from it. You shouldn't be kind of worrying about which application the citizens want to use to access the data in the Kanta. I think that should be something that the citizens can choose themselves. Another example from Sweden is that in Sweden, actually, there's a system similar to Finland, that there's 21 regions that are responsible for the public healthcare. And these regions have decided to have the same EMRs within a region. And sometimes they kind of effectively also force all providers, also private providers, into the same EMR system. Of course, this has benefits. When you have the same EMR across all providers in a region, it's nice for the doctors and the nurses. It's always the same system. There's high interoperability on a regional level. But this also has challenges. So when you do it in this way, and you basically kind of force everyone in a region to have a certain EMR and a certain software, of course, the EMR procurements and deployments, they become massive projects. So when you actually would need to change the EMR on a regional level, it becomes this massive project that nobody wants to do. So, for example, in the Stockholm region, they are using a fairly old EMR. I don't think many people regard it as modern or really functioning anymore. But it's just politically, no one wants to take the hit of doing this massive project to renew it. So it kind of ends up shooting itself in the leg a little bit. And then, of course, despite kind of the regional level consistency, there's no national standard, so you're still not getting these benefits on a national level. Then also, I think something to really think about, and this I've seen in Finland as well on the public side, that when you do make decisions to run an EMR on a regional level, it should be really important to make sure in the tender that these EMR systems have to have open APIs, because when they don't, it's really restricting the innovation. Many of the EMR companies, they claim that it has to do something with kind of data safety, that they're not opening the APIs, but I would claim that a lot of it is that they're really just trying to protect their backyard and kind of hope that they can provide any other solutions. So I think the learning from here is really that when kind of thinking on a regional level, probably doesn't make sense to force certain systems on all providers, as that ends up blocking innovation. But you should kind of focus on setting the requirements on how the systems should work, and make sure that they have open APIs, because the open APIs will really then be the key to the interoperability of everything in the system. The reimbursing of remote consultations. This is, I think I have fun examples from many countries, but I've decided to take Sweden as an example because it's one of the most interesting, I think. In Sweden, the primary care market is built on a freedom of choice capitation-based model. So what it means is that when I lived in Sweden, I would list to a primary care center, probably near where I lived, and that center would then receive a fixed reimbursement for taking care of me. So basically, I guess it's around 300 to 400 euros a year for my primary care provision. But then, of course, what happens if I am in the north of Sweden skiing and I get sick there, and I go to a primary care center in Åre? Of course, they should get some money for treating me, because otherwise they won't want to treat me. So there's this kind of out of home region reimbursement, which has traditionally been quite high. I guess the rationale was that if you really go to a primary care center when you're not home, you probably really are sick. You're not just you don't just want to have some company. So this was over 200 euros per visit. And then about 10 years ago, some kind of digital disruptor realized that they could actually run video calls and claim that the consultation is happening out of home. So they started sending bills to the government for whatever 250 euros per video call, which of course in the beginning was a good way to start the business. Now along the years, this has been modified. Now it's a bit different per region, but it still exists, and kind of telehealth businesses are still using it, and it's typically based on video calls. Now, I think why in Sweden politically it was decided to kind of not tackle this from the beginning was that they saw that at least it's kind of introducing remote consultations to everyone. So Sweden now has a very high penetration of remote consultations. Of course, I mean, the challenges is that especially in the beginning, you ended up spending very high amounts of money on a care provision that could have been provided for much cheaper and in also cheaper ways. So you ended up using a lot of tax money on maybe a questionable way of questionable service. But I guess also the problem that I see in many countries is that the authorities, they decide kind of which type of remote consultation is subsidized. So Sweden and Germany have fallen into this pitfall of reimbursing video calls. And maybe unintuitively, but you don't need video calls in healthcare. And it's not a very productive way of running remote consultations. I mean, video call businesses, they typically average about 2 to 3 video calls per hour, which is more or less the same as in a physical meeting or physical clinic, where they also average around 2 to 3 per hour. Actually, Germany is an outlier. German kind of statutory health insurance has created a very efficient model in some consultation modes in physical consultations, but in the Nordics, it's kind of 2 to 3. Whereas then you have countries like Finland and Estonia, where both private and public healthcare organizations are running basically chat-based remote consultations. Of course, it's text, it's videos, text or pictures. Pictures are typically better quality as well. So if you want to show a rash, it's better to take a picture of it than video. And when it's text-based, you can automate a lot of the doctor's work. The doctor can actually be treating multiple patients at the same time. So the productivity of these kind of chat-based doctor's appointments it can be amazing. So we've seen healthcare providers that are running kind of digital clinic teams where the doctors on average are treating 15 patients per hour. And these are real high quality doctor's appointments where in about 90% the patient is getting treated, is getting the help that he or she needed. So of course, with that type of productivity, the reimbursement level for a chat-based consultation can also be much lower. So the learning here is that I think it's for I'm sure that this was probably not meant as part of the telematic infrastructure, but really for remote consultations to grow in a country. First of all, you need to reimburse them despite the model. Or you can have different prices for models, so different for video, different for chat, different for phone, and you shouldn't have any artificial constraints on what you're allowed, or how are you allowed to do remote consultations. And basically the most productive models will win, and the models that people actually like using. And the big point there is that people in the end, they really like these chat-based consultations as well, because then they get the help whenever they need it. They don't have to reserve a time. They can be chatting with a doctor during a meeting or on the bus or in the toilet. So it really works from the patient's point of view. Maybe a fun anecdote is our customer in the Netherlands that was kind of interested in this model, but and they're the largest primary care provider in the Netherlands, but they were very sure that the Dutch people will not like chatting with the doctor, but they will want to have video calls. We told them that sure, that's fine. You can whenever upgrade the chat into a video call if that's needed. And now after running this type of service in the Netherlands for 1.5 years, I think the number of chats that have been upgraded into video is under 1%. So the Dutch found this model very quickly and really seem to like it there as well. Then a kind of a special topic on kind of overall data infrastructure. I think this is not only in Finland. This is in many countries that social and healthcare data are separated. In Finland, the reason is that historically the healthcare and social care have been provided by separate organizations. So today, these organizations, they interpret GDPR in a way that forces the separation of social and healthcare data. And I don't think there's any successes or logic or kind of reason for separating these two data, because of course very often people who have a lot of social and healthcare issues, the issues they intertwine. But now professionals are not able or allowed to see the data from the other side of the fence, which doesn't really serve the patient either. And of course, for companies like Be Healthy or the EMR organizations, it's a real headache for building the system so that you're able to separate the data completely and make sure that a professional working in healthcare doesn't see the data on the social care side. Of course, it makes it even trickier from the motivation point of view when you're separating them, but you also know that it doesn't really make sense to separate them. I know that on the kind of government level in Finland, they are also trying to end the separation of data, but I understand they have a lot of other things to take care of, so it takes a lot of time. So there was kind of some examples and maybe summarizing some of the most important points that I've bumped into and that I really believe kind of help in these topics. One is having this digital ID on a national level. It helps in so many things in healthcare to make the digital development, make the digital services easier to implement. Then I'm a very strong believer in that authorities, they shouldn't be developing systems or software themselves. They shouldn't be forcing a certain system or software, but should really be focusing on creating a clear framework or set of rules, and most importantly, requiring open APIs from all the systems. And when you do that, then the market will take care that the best systems win. And when you've made sure that they have to have open APIs, then it's also easy to make them talk together. Of course, if taking this even a bit further, it would be a wonderful situation if the APIs were actually also standardized in a way that it would be easy to plug together different systems. At Be Healthy, we're always integrating into our customers' EMRs, and we've done it for multiple systems around the world, and it is successful in the end, but it is way too cumbersome at the moment, and we often use partners who kind of build this adaptation layer between our APIs and the EMR's APIs, whereas if they were actually somehow standardized, you could make it so much quicker. then on the kind of remote consultations, I'm a huge believer in being able to reimburse for all types, because I know that the chat will always win if you do that. It's so much more productive, and patients actually also like it more. And you shouldn't have any artificial restraints on remote consultation. So restraints that I've seen, actually probably Germany has had all of these restraints. Not sure if they are still in place, but I've seen that the patient and the physician should be in the same region. Why? Isn't that the whole idea of remote consultations, that you don't have to be physically close to each other? I've seen restraints that the first contact, if there's a new patient, that should be a physical one. I can somehow understand the reasoning for this type of argument, but still in practice it typically goes the other way around. So patients, of course, they want the really low threshold, easy access to care in the beginning, which is the digital. And then during the digital, the remote consultation, however that's done, of course, then if the patient needs physical attention, it should be referred to it. I've also seen a restraint that only a certain percentage of a doctor's visits should be allowed to be digital. I can't see any logic to that. I think it's, or maybe I could see an argument saying that the doctor should somehow be kind of seeing patients physically to make sure that their abilities stay on the right level or something like that. But I don't think in practice it makes any sense. I've seen in our customer organizations, there are some doctors that they get really excited about the digital kind of remote consulting work, and they end up mostly doing remote consultations. Those are rare. So mostly doctors naturally want to divide their work across the remote and the physical. So the lion's share of doctors, they want to do work in a way that they work a couple of hours, or maybe they have a couple of like 2 or 4 hour shifts per week doing remote consultations, and then the rest they do physically. But there's no reason to kind of set a random percentage from the authorities' point of view. And then the final one, don't separate health and social care data. It doesn't help anyone.